Hello and welcome everyone. This is a final session in our four-part webinar series here by the Workforce Risk Management team. You are joining here for session 4, which is going to be learning how to turn people from bystanders to upstanders and creating a culture of early reporting in your organization. As I mentioned, this is kind of the fourth and final session in our 4-part series. We've covered everything from the 8 critical steps to designing your workplace violence program to what exactly is workplace violence prevention and why does it matter to your organization and the role that domestic violence plays in crafting your workforce or workplace violence prevention program. So this is really, really an important session that focuses on your people and how you can empower and create systems around helping your people feel more comfortable being upstanders instead of watching potential risk situations evolve. So just a couple of housekeeping items here is we are going to be recording the session. We will be providing the slides and handouts. If you look in the upper right-hand corner of your go to webinar session here, you'll see an icon with the paperclip. There's some materials to go with today's sessions. You can access those now or download those for later use. For our purposes, you'll see the question box, which is the icon with the question. We use that kind of interchangeably, both to submit your questions and then also if we ask you to put something in the chat, just go ahead and pop it in the box with the question. Our team will get that information over to us to address as we go through things. If you are here because you're looking for CPE and HRCI credits, there's a couple of things you need to do throughout the session to make sure that those are awarded to you. There's going to be 3 poll questions dispersed throughout the presentation today. You will need to interact and engage and answer all 3 of those questions. So make sure that you're looking for those and we'll make it super obvious when the poll question pops up so nobody misses anything. And then you also need to participate in a quick 2-question survey post session. So don't just click out when the meeting wraps up. Make sure that you stick around and get that survey information filled out. I think that's it for housekeeping items. So I am going to introduce you to our expert that's going to lead the session today, Mr. Matt Doherty.
Thank you, Lisa. And it's great to be here once again. This will be our 4th and last session, and we thought it was very important that in our first session we talk about why do you need workplace violence and what are those elements in our prevention policies and programs. And then we had a very special guest, our partner, Ashley Bendix, to talk about that importance of domestic violence. And then the last session, we talked about the 8 critical steps to building a program. Just like domestic violence, we thought we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about bystanders and upstanders. Here's a portrayal of me in the media and what caused that. I get contacted by the media constantly on when there is an incident. And because we're such into the prevention and policies and programs and training and work active cases, and when I'm frequently interviewed, my response is to an incident, and the Cape Gazette shooting in Annapolis, Maryland is a very good example. This person was a disgruntled reader that was frequently known to them and constantly, well, before they even identified this person, a reporter from the Washington Post called me, Mark Berman, and he talked to me frequently when these incidents occur. And my canned response, nobody can predict violence, but there's a high likelihood that person was known by the company, whether it be a customer, vendor, client, reader, family member with the domestic violence, all of those things. There's a high likelihood that they were known by other employees. And the question is, if they did come forward, why didn't it resonate, and why didn't they come forward? So it's really that bystander phenomenon. The Washington Post reporter, Mark, he ended up following me out to Chicago to watch us train our own Sikich employees on these critical steps. The Navy Yard shooting that I talked about last session, where an employee complained about an IT individual outsourced that was constantly disrupting the workforce, and but only complained to her parents. It really didn't resonate with the higher echelons of the company because they didn't have a program. So really, we hope to answer what is a bystander, what is the phenomenon, how do we encourage that reporting, and why it's just so critically important. So what you're going to learn today, again, I retired as the agent in charge of the Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center. Midway through my career, we significantly changed the way we investigate cases. What are those barriers to reporting? Psychological safety, and I'm really pleased that we're going to have Dr. Amy Edmondson on in a video to talk about this, and the importance of culture and violence prevention is just really key. All of these things, it isn't just about violence prevention, it's about the decision people make when they see something concerning and what kind of workplace makes it easier to speak up. So this is one of the first studies of its kind. I had made reference previously to the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals. This is one of the seminal documents for preventive threat assessment. You know, I have tremendous experience in the government agencies, and there was a seminal study even before the internet took place, revealing my age here. And there was a lot of cases that came to the Secret Service's attention that should have come to our attention sooner. And so we drastically changed based on this study. It's publicly available. Most people that carry out an act of workplace violence or preventive violence, they don't make a direct threat prior to carrying out the act. We're not condoning direct threats, but they're not tolerated, and we do report them. But it really didn't include an exhaustive study of the issue of bystander. Most people that carry out acts of targeted violence don't direct their threats towards the target or law enforcement. In other words, they don't announce it in advance, but their behavior concerned others. So now a lot of research has taken place since this study in the 1990s. This changed the way the Secret Service does business. We don't emphasize whether somebody made a threat or not. That should be looked into, but the absence of a threat doesn't mean preclude them from committing violence. But the bystander language is really essentially missing. And you really needed a commission of the study of the problem. And we spent more time and money on this problem and developed some seminal and primary research. And I'm going to talk about that research since that study. When I was at the National Threat Assessment Center, the phenomenon since Columbine, a lot of shootings had taken place, and the Department of Education was thoroughly alarmed. They wanted to know, is there a profile of a school shooter and what's going on here? And people were being stigmatized in regards to school shooting. Those of us old enough to remember Columbine, they were very worried about stigmatizing kids. In Columbine, there were two white kids with black t-shirts, bullied, etc. And they were worried that anybody that was a white kid with a black t-shirt maybe didn't get along with the social norms would be doing that. And they wanted us to look, can you provide some guidance for us, like you do for state and local law enforcement for assassination research? And we looked at 41 shooters and 37 incidents of targeted violence. We realized that school shootings were not a new phenomenon, as you well know from recent escalation of this phenomenon. They did not make a direct threat. I remember that our research team interviewed someone, one of the people that in the study, look, you killed your parents, you killed your teacher, why didn't you make a threat? And they said, because we wanted to carry it out. We didn't want to announce it ahead of time. But the key is, very rarely did someone make a direct threat towards the target or law enforcement, but others knew about it. In 81% of these attacks, at least one other person knew. There's a case in Bethel, Alaska with Evan Ramsey. He was a student, and the day that he came in to shoot other students and kill them, serving a life sentence, at any given day, there were two people on the lobby balcony of this school in Bethel, Alaska. The day he carried out the shooting, there were at least 20 students in the balcony. They knew this was going to go on. Matter of fact, one woman ran up to the balcony and they said, you belong on the list, you're down there. Lots of people know about these attacks, and that's why it's very important to encourage bystanders to become upstanders, to have that knowledge. And we really, advance that planned knowledge, look at the percentage of people that knew about this case, and look at the media reports of which I've been interviewed and that you've seen on active shooter. Um, we knew it was this person all along, or we were always concerned, but nobody did anything. We couldn't tell anybody about that person. So the issue of bystander has been a huge issue. And how do we create that environment where people come forward? Now, I'm very pleased to hear that since this seminal research, you could do an internet search and find out that many of these cases in other averted school shootings, bystanders came forward. They centered around their positive relationships. These are the Columbine victims. According to the report, um, students felt connected to the school when they believed someone in the school cared about them, that they came forward, and that they see this as quoted in the slide. Um, the bystander stated that potential incident seems too familiar to events in Colorado where other people knew about the attack in advance and it should have been thwarted in the first place. So bystander and upstander are really commingled, and you need to create that environment of bystander in your workplace where people knew about this and ahead of time. I'll give you an example. We went to a pharmaceutical company. We did that needs assessment I talked about in the previous section. Um, and I warned them before we get to that next phase of training or developing your program, we have evidence that there's domestic violence situations on your pharmaceutical company manufacturing floor. We warned them about that. There was no warning sign education, anything like that during our needs assessment. It was an issue. Well, imagine a workforce that was predominantly women. They've been working together for over 20 years, dozens of them. They supported each other at wedding showers and baby showers, and they knew one of their colleagues was having trouble with their soon-to-be ex-husband. She called in sick one day. They didn't come forward. They didn't want to get her in trouble. She showed up 2 days later with bruises around her face. They didn't want to get her in trouble. They thought it was none of our business. Let's just stay out of it. They weren't upstanders coming forward. And I was called by this pharmaceutical company after the fact, after the soon to be ex husband killed her in a parking lot 2 days later. And imagine the emotional impact that that has on an institution or an entity when people knew about things and didn't come forward. And that's what we're going to explore today. Why didn't they come forward? What were the mechanisms out there or lack of that prevented them from coming forward in the first place? So even the Secret Service, they looked at the mass attacks in public spaces. That was just done relatively recently. And it's very important. They looked at 173 incidents of targeted violence where known or knowable assailant selects their target prior to the attack. And these attacks in 173 public spaces were at workplaces, schools, military bases, places of worship, other public spaces, public transportation, like the San Jose incident that we provided expert testimony on for other concerns that people had. 75% of these attacks, and this is a fresh study, the perpetrator exhibited warning signs to others, including family, friends, coworkers, neighbors, school officials, mental health professionals, and members of the public. And it's a significant leakage. When you hear the term leakage, that's an FBI term, where others knew about it in advance. They had some pieces of information. And that's why in our workplace violence consultations, when we get a concerning employee soon to be suspended or terminated, or a disgruntled customer, one of the first things we look at is there anybody responsible that's close to them that they could tell us what's going on? Not just an internet search, not just a social media search or an investigation, what's going on in their life. And bystanders are just a key opportunity for us to intervene and report that person's concerning behavior. And that's what this is about. That's why this is an entire session devoted to this, to create that environment of a bystander. So why is the reporting so difficult? Because people don't want to come forward. I told you about the insurance company where somebody went on a blind date and didn't want to come forward until we reminded her, here's the new policies, there's anti-discrimination policies, you can come forward if anybody has a restraining order. She finally had the courage to do so. We ended up arresting that person that she went on a blind date with. It had nothing to do with her professional performance. As a matter of fact, she was recently promoted, I was told by the CEO the other day. Um, but the point about that is, I interviewed her after the fact. How come you didn't want to come forward? She goes, I just wasn't comfortable. I didn't want people to think less of me. Um, I didn't want people to know what I was going on. But the CEO called me after the incident, and the person was arrested for other bad things. The CEO said, there's no doubt in my mind that other people of her demographic, other people, other young women, did not come forward. They didn't want to get her in trouble. They didn't want to be perceived as a whistleblower or telling on somebody when you're concerned about something. They aren't just feelings, there are systematic barriers that organizations can address. But first, we have to understand what the barriers are. And these are all barriers to reporting um, these incidents. It's commonly recognized that 50 to 60% of workplace violence incidents go unreported. So I can practically guarantee you there are concerning situations if you don't have a robust workplace violence prevention program and training and self-awareness and reporting mechanisms, that there are issues unbeknownst to you. I had a major financial house in downtown Chicago, nationally recognized, and the legal counsel called me to develop these programs. So our workforce risk management team came in, we developed the programs, and we did a needs assessment. And in the last session, one of our processes of needs assessment, interviewing senior leaders, but also receptionists, executive assistants. And at the end of the needs assessment, as we're developing the policies, the legal counsel made an assumption. He said, it's interesting, there's nobody, we haven't had any incidents. I just need to do this for compliance reasons in Illinois. And so, well, you did have an incident. You had an executive assistant who was stalked by a disgruntled IT employee, contractor, followed her to her car. Other people knew about it. And he was in possession of a weapon at the workforce. His jaw dropped. He had no idea. And he says, why didn't I know about this sooner? Because you didn't have a reporting mechanism. You have a cultural issue where people were unsure if this was serious enough to report. They weren't sure if it would be responded to. There was no prompt action and response on previous incidents. So really, there's a lot of cases out there that are barriers to reporting that I'm sure many of you have an issue that's under the radar that you're not aware of. This isn't fear mongering. This is early intervention. When you have a concerning case, you want to be able to know as soon as possible that there's a concerning situation for employees. So a lot of legal and policy confusion about what can we share. As I told you, oftentimes legal doesn't want to share anything because it's legally protected, or HR doesn't want to share anything because of HIPAA violations or confidentiality about an employee assistance, emotionally and cultural pressures that do it. And here's a point of trivia. When we go into a company, we look at employee assistance programs, and they should be able to share that information, especially among employees, to report concerning behaviors about an employee. It's not a violation of privacy. It's not a violation of HIPAA or any of this. They're not confident. The employees that have knowledge of these situations, tragically, that didn't report it, they just don't know what the reporting protocols are. That's why it's so important in your program to create this. They also fear retaliation. Um, it's very clear in our policies that we help our clients. We clearly state there'll be no retaliation. In other words, you have concern about an employee or a boss or a client, and it turns out to be, frankly, a nothing burger, or it's been resolved. But there shouldn't be retaliation if you have a legitimate concern about your environment. And reporting a senior leader that could be very risky. That's why we encourage anonymous reporting and flash news bulletin. Bosses are not immune from displaying concerning behaviors, whether it be bullying, harassment, stalking, um, and some people just aren't comfortable reporting that. We have to re-emphasize with the company culture. You can report it anonymously, but nobody should be subjected to a concerning situation. Feel free to come forward. Uh, and there's practical barriers to reporting as well. We have had cases where we were just too busy and couldn't address it properly, and we were unsure if it was serious enough. Again, as I said before, SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management, is getting away from zero tolerance policies to zero tolerance for incidents. It's not a punitive program. Um, we want to have early intervention. If somebody appeals to be disheveled and not coming forward, and I'll give you an example of somebody that came forward just recently. Um, we One of our clients, we were called by a law firm, and it was after the fact they had an incident, and it's really a good story to tell um, about somebody that comes forward with this. Um, she, an employee, came to work, um, a male, single, coming to work every day in the parking lot. He's kind of a type A personality on a very large law firm not far from me in Washington, D.C., and they were a client, about 1,000 lawyers. He comes to work every day at 6 o'clock and in the morning to work out in the gym. So, and he's usually by himself, kind of that type A personality, gets the workout in, God bless him. And he works out in the gym. He's doing this for weeks, if not months, throughout his career there. And one day he notices when he pulls in at 6 a.m., he notices a car there, and a woman in the car. He recognized her as a lawyer colleague, but never worked with her. She was at a completely different department, completely different floor. And he goes into work, and he goes into the gym and works out. And she comes in on a Monday morning. She comes in, works out, or walks into the women's locker room, doesn't work out, um, came in sweats, sweat clothes, came out dressed and ready to work. He doesn't think anything of it. Who among us haven't gotten ready for work at the last minute on a Monday? Um, this kept up for about a week and a half, and he had never seen her before in the gym. She never worked out once. And for a couple of days, he walked by her car and noticed her clothes were in the car. And he thought, geez, I think she's living in the car. Something's going on. And he went to HR. He felt comfortable enough to go to HR. It's a good story to tell as the case, we worked that case. He went to HR and he goes, look, I am here to report a concern, and this is not to get this person in trouble. I want to assure you I don't have a relationship with either professional, platonic, or romantic. I don't even know her. She's on another floor. I know her enough to say hello as she comes into the gym, but I'm really concerned about her safety and health. Um, I think she's living in the car. All her clothes are in there, piled full of clothes, and she's not working out, um, which is a sign of domestic abuse, by the way. Appears to be living in the car, and work is her only solace to get groomed and ready to work. And they found out later, HR did an inquiry, and she broke down, and she was a victim of extreme domestic abuse in her home situation. They got her domestic advocacy resources, et cetera. But he felt comfortable enough to report this situation. I admired him for doing that because a lot of people wouldn't have been comfortable enough. It's none of my business, the company culture. People will think I'm just trying to, tell on her to get ahead. And that wasn't the case at all. So those are good things. So he was sure, he thought it was serious enough to come to HR, and it could have been innocuous. Could have been she was in between moving homes, but he came forward with that explanation. So you're the front line of prevention. That's what we tell our general employees in the foundational training. Look for those baseline behaviors and identify non-normative behaviors that you want to have that ability to intervene and go from the troubled behavior to the disturbing behavior. You want to look at troubled employees in a troubling environment or disturbing environment and see what you can do to help.
Okay, it's everybody's favorite time. It's our first poll question here, so feel free to put your response in. What's the biggest reason people at your workplace hesitate to report concerning behavior? Go ahead and give you a few more seconds to weigh in on that. It's anything from fear of retaliation, not thinking anything's going to change, so why bother to report it? Unsure if it qualifies as reportable, not sure what the threshold or the standard is, and don't know where or how to report it, or they may fear intimidation or it's reporting on somebody senior. So we're going to give this a couple more seconds here. It looks like most of the votes are coming in. Again, you do need to vote and participate in each poll to be able to get those credits. So, all right, Matt, looks like the unsure what qualifies as reportable by kind of a landslide, dare I say,
Yeah,
is
yeah,
what is hanging most people up. That's a little surprising to me.
yeah, and I feel like I didn't put anybody up to say this, and that's what we covered in the previous slide. You know, fear of retaliation, that's a big one. And but look at that, as Lisa, you pointed out, unsure what qualifies as reportable. That is the reason why in our last session we talked about enterprise-wide training. What are the warning signs of it? It's very easy in a workplace violence prevention program. I'm fairly confident that if you saw a fight, if you saw a direct threat, or overt and blatant sexual harassment, that gets reported, right? That's kind of what I consider that scientific term is a no-brainer. But what are the warning signs in advance of somebody that's some of the warning signs are somebody wearing all of a sudden wearing excessive makeup to hide bruises, somebody that appears that was once gregarious and very outgoing is shy and introverted. Those types of concerns, and this is not meant to be a big brother or big sister exercise, but you really need an educated workforce to determine what's reportable for that. What are the signs of untreated mental health for that? Um, again, that's just significant. What qualifies as reportable, that tells me the organization doesn't have any training in this. And this is not extensive training, it's just being aware. And we do notice that morale goes up when people do realize we're thinking about workplace violence prevention. And this is a caring company culture of courtesy, respect, and safety to report. So, Lisa, thanks for that. That's just a key component is that training.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too that it's kind of the disturbing the complacency of I should just mind my own business, right? Like
Correct.
that's how risk become threats and threats become incidents is when we are too much in that fearful space of I should just mind my own business because we don't want to look silly or we don't want to, get somebody in trouble, as you've mentioned several times, seems to be the real catalyst in a lot of cases why people don't mention it. So I think it does, that demonstrates that it does require good definition, and more
Hmm.
importantly, it requires an environment where employees are encouraged and empowered to be a little courageous and to kind of advocate for themselves and for others versus just minding our own business, which feels like the safer choice sometimes.
Correct. And again, in many of the cases we had, and you've seen it reported in the media, Lisa, you're spot on. Because if you don't report it and there is an incident, imagine the guilt that takes place, and frankly, anger on the part of employees because they weren't sure. I've never been trained in this. I didn't know to report. I didn't know who to go to with this concern. It was about
Yeah.
my boss, and I didn't know what I could do about this. The reputational damage, again, your most important asset is your people. I don't want to discount the personal safety and the tragedies that have occurred, but the reputational damage to a company can just be devastating. People don't want to go back to work. Morale is affected. Nobody did anything about this. I had nobody to report it to. So a lot of mixed, elevated emotions take place after an incident. And part of that is we had nobody to report it to. So tragic.
Yeah, yeah. I think there was a question that came in, Matt. I think that segues. We'll just take it here so it doesn't get missed. Is would
Sure.
you all then encourage that we have nuanced conversations with managers to look out for certain behaviors? So, as a leadership team, should we be having these conversations with our managers of what behaviors to look for? And they go on to say we have a fairly extensive policy and training, but folks still have issues reporting, and they work in DC Gov within our Department of Transportation. So there's policies, there's training, but there's still kind of that hesitancy. Any advice on how to maybe coach managers around that?
Absolutely. As Lisa and our workforce risk management team, our approach is to train the entire workforce. Short, it could be on our an e-learning that we designed to be uploaded to your LMS because people have overlapping shifts. The employees need to know within a half an hour, what are the warning signs to report. Managers really need training. It's probably one of our most popular offerings, de-escalation and conflict resolution. Oftentimes, managers, even if it's a concerning situation that's not of their doing, the way they deal with it oftentimes can escalate a situation. We've had a case where a manager had low tolerance for being late, and one person was late because his wife and kid were in a minor car accident, and he wanted to go stop and see them. And the manager started yelling at them. He goes, "You got a deliverable due today." Well, that didn't go over very well for somebody that was already under a lot of stress and came in and
Right.
frankly punched the boss. We're not condoning punching your boss as a response to that, but de-escalation, conflict resolution, how to manage concerning situations like domestic violence is a good example. It's not an invasion of privacy to say, "Hey, Sally, is everything going okay today? I just noticed you're not yourself lately." That's not an invasion of privacy. That's a performance manager, but it might come out that, well, I have a domestic situation I've been dealing with. So very important for managers to have de-escalation, conflict resolution training, be trained, because guess what happens with our clients? We educate the whole workforce. Um, Guess what? Now the managers are going to get these reporting behaviors, and they're going to get reporting. So you just can't leave them with an empty desk and ill-equipped to handle these situations and how to manage these situations. And then what gets reported up the chain, so that people are knowing about it. Lisa and our team, we have one thing in common with HR. We get calls on Fridays at 3 o'clock, and you HR people know what I'm talking about. Your first question is, why the heck didn't I know about this sooner? Because this has been a languishing problem. And that's usually when we get our serious cases that run through the weekend is late Friday, when really it should have been intervened a while ago by a manager and reported.
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity when you train and equip your managers and encourage them to kind of lead by that courageous question, or that, maybe taking that extra minute to check in with your employee, or ask the question and
Yeah,
create opportunity for them to then feel. And it ties right into this, the psychological safety slide that we're moving on to. But the manager modeling that and creating space for that, I think, is a great way to help employees at any level feel a little bit more courageous and comfortable, and disclosing
yeah,
some of those concerning behaviors early.
yeah. I couldn't agree more. So, um, and let's talk about environment. There's a term out there. Some of you know it well, and some of you may not. I didn't until just a few years ago. But psychological safety. Um, Without psychological safety, nobody speaks up. They don't feel comfortable, and we can't fix what we don't hear about. Um, it's really creating that environment where people are comfortable reporting mistakes. Amy Edmondson has been really one of the leaders. And just a little background before I show you the video in the next slide. She was a HR consultant, written many books about this psychological safety. But what got her interested? She was an HR consultant in hospital systems, and one of her findings in being comfortable about reporting, she actually came across a case where there was a very strict, renowned doctor delivering a pregnancy. He was very intolerant of reporting mistakes. Nurses were told to be in their place, only speak when I need something. Um, don't ever question my authority. And several nurses noticed that he wasn't following a certain procedure for a high risk pregnancy delivery. And she came in and interviewed a variety of people, and that situation came to her attention. They weren't comfortable reporting uh, this incident. So what happened is, one of her findings is that it sounds antithetical to what we are used to, but high performing offices or entities in these hospital systems and the research she has done, they had the most issues that were reported. The most problems that we reported were from high performing entities. The low performing entities on performance, on productivity, they had the least amount of reporting. It's kind of been, when you first read it, well, that's impossible. How can a high performing um, entity have the most reported problems? That means that entity should be a mess, right? Well, just the opposite. Because people are comfortable reporting and provide that candid feedback, it leads to a more productive entity. And so creating a psychological safety in your organization is the key to getting optimal use, whether it be for profit purposes, for efficiency of your office, psychological safety, and getting reported those problems. That's a good office where people aren't afraid to bring problems to your attention. The low performing offices, the low performers that have experienced workplace violence, people weren't comfortable coming forward. So it's, again, sounds like a spectrum, right? Where, geez, that doesn't make sense. A high performing office has the most reported issues. How can that be that they're high performing? Well, that's the reason why they're high performing. People are comfortable about coming forward. It's being dealt with appropriately, and they really feel that that's their engine for performance. And it really can be eroded. A low performing office, biases of all types, social, cultural, or organizational norms, they're not comfortable. So let's go to the next slide and hear from Amy herself. I'm a huge fan of hers for psychological safety, as we all are.
So one of the most important jobs of any manager, of any leader, is to work like crazy to build a culture or a climate, psychological safety. And I define that as a culture in which everyone understands that they have both a responsibility and an expectation to speak up with ideas, questions, concerns, and that they won't be punished or humiliated for doing so. So it's okay to raise crazy ideas. It's okay to talk about mistakes. It's okay to bring up failures and so on. And I understand that that's part of my job as an individual, and the leader understands that it's part of his or her job to create that shared belief, or else we won't come up with anything new. We won't innovate. We won't catch and correct error when it comes along, because human beings are very sensitive to interpersonal risks. We are quite concerned about what others think of us. And so the natural fallback position is that I want you to think well of me, so I'm not going to say something I think might make me look stupid or incompetent or intrusive or any other negative attribute. And so it's the job of the leader, the highest status person around, to make sure everyone understands anything goes. It's required. The nature of the work today requires us to be this way, to have this kind of environment.
Yeah, so I'm just a huge fan of hers. I'm going to speak on this critical role of organizational culture and climate in eliminating or reducing workplace violence prevention. Sometimes people in the poll, hey, we don't have a program or we don't manage that, but in actuality, you are managing these cases. You're involved in your subordinate's life without being intrusive. You know, a good manager would know what their backgrounds are and any issues that they're dealing with every day, consciously or unconsciously. And we want to capture those actions and assumptions and improve on them. You know, we always keep an eye out what manager or coworker is really doing the right thing to make people feel comfortable coming forward to them. That's why we got to be very careful with that de-escalation and conflict resolution to make sure that you're reporting that information.
Okay, we're back with our next poll question. This is 2 of 3. Again, just a reminder, we need your response in order to track towards those CPE credits here. Which of these actions would most help the workforce in your organization feel more confident reporting concerning behaviors? We have knowing they won't face retaliation, clear, easy to follow reporting process, so that knowledge piece of it, regular manager check-ins, that FaceTime one-on-one, that interpersonal connection, seeing others speak up without consequences. So having models and examples of where we're really doing things the right way, or more training on what's reportable, bringing that clarity around issues that they may want to report on. And we saw in our last survey how that not knowing or not maybe having a clear definition can really impede that reporting. So, all right, let's see. It looks like clear, easy to follow reporting process is the number one thing, according to our survey here, that would encourage people to be more confident in reporting their behavior. Anything surprising to you about that, Matt?
Not really. I think that's great that the majority that would help with that clear reporting. It's really important in workplace violence prevention program. A lot of times people don't want to be retaliated against for reporting a concerning behavior. That should not be held against them. One of the things we emphasize, it has to be a true motivation of intent to report a concerning situation, not just to try to get somebody in trouble. That should not be tolerated and should be punitive. But no, it doesn't surprise me at all. And seeing others speak up without consequences, that's extremely important too. So just that fostering, it's not a punitive or whistleblowing exercise. And that environment makes you a more efficient office where people are comfortable. It's those people that don't report because they're so uncomfortable that can really have tragic consequences. And you can start getting bad reviews on Glassdoor and Indeed if you're not have that psychological safety. And that's been our experience with psychological safety. So really, it's interesting research. These categories of people all work within your organization, and boomers are they're team oriented. But there's others. They expect feedback. They want to know how they're doing. They require feedback. It's very important to recognize, and we've all seen this, especially in the last few years, to recognize those gender biases, racial biases, underrepresented voices. Everyone needs to hear and recognize how to identify and generate those norms for effective reporting. We have to adapt to the feedback culture that Gen Z and millennials expect. I'm a baby boomer. I don't need feedback every single day. But boomers also don't want to rock the boat. They're not going to report things. They let it go off of them. It's just old school. They don't want to lose their job, things like that. So really, it's important to consider Gen Z and millennials and boomers, their needs, and the fact that they all work in your organization. Boomers are team oriented, but they might be hesitant, and Gen Z and millennials expect that diversity and that feedback. So it's very important to recognize. Not everyone's natural at this, but the willingness to learn is critical to creating that psychological safe environment. Definitely hope you go back with that psychological safety. So enhancing that organizational culture, look at some of the research that's been out there. Train managers to trust confidence because employees report concerning behavior. This was just relatively recently. There was a research organization, Ethisphere, and you really need to 56% report to their manager, 33% of concerning situations they report to HR, and 20% to the manager's manager. They got to be comfortable. There's got to be different outlets to report these concerning situations. And there's always areas for needs of improvement for that. And that's why when we do the training, oftentimes we promote EAP or counseling services, things like that, to create that environment where you're very comfortably coming forward, just like that attorney who very, in my mind, heroically came forward with nothing but the most true and upstanding and esteemed motivation because he was concerned about somebody. He wasn't there for retaliating against her or any of that. So enhancing that organizational culture, you really need to emphasize that support We've had a variety of cases that have occurred for us, and giving that feedback for us. It's very important when a company has a concerning situation that they report it, just like the attorney I told you about in the parking lot situation. We really valued his point of view. When we interviewed him, he stressing that he didn't have a relationship. He was just concerned about their health and well-being. And there was no retaliation for that. Can you imagine if there had been an excuse for her having her clothes in the car? Maybe she was moving between residences and it was very innocuous, meaning that doesn't mean that that attorney who reported her should be worried about retaliation. There could be a very reasonable explanation with that. Oftentimes there are reasonable explanations for that, but you really have to show that appreciation when employees speak up. And the worst thing you can do is not respond to the incident or not have it addressed. If the reputation of your organization gets out there that when somebody does have psychological safety and they report that information and nothing is done about it and you don't get back to them, that can have just disastrous consequences. So all of these efforts towards building a positive corporate culture contribute to the bottom line. If they have a positive experience, they're 8 times more likely to stay and 4 times more committed. So that's your retention right there than having a negative experience. These elements create a sticky, rational, relational employee experience compared to more fleeting mercenary one. Employees must compete to top job candidates. So if you have, look at the statistics, that's what they're looking for, is a secure environment. They believe their employer is responsible to be a force for good. You have to have faith in your employer that you're doing the right thing. 73% of job applicants aren't likely to accept a job if the organizational values don't align with their own. So creating that psychological safety, just like the workplace violence prevention program, it's all tied in together to increase that morale and have it go up. The woman that went on a blind date that we intervened for and got a copy of the restraining order and extended the restraining order to the office. The CEO called me after that situation was resolved. Other women knew about this. They didn't report it because they didn't want to get her in trouble, but they saw how this situation was handled with a lot of dignity, with a lot of confidentiality. It had nothing to do with her performance, having gone on a blind date, mistakenly so, with a bad guy. She didn't initially report it until she was comfortable with that psychological safety. But my point about that is the CEO noticed about 2 months later that his job reviews were going through the roof with his younger demographic. This is a great place to work. They like how people are treated. They're comfortable. Remember, Gen Z and millennials, they're comfortable coming forward, reporting concerning situations, and they're adhered to. So it's just extremely important for the productivity of your office. So effective workplace violence can do. Again, in Annapolis, look that up. It's the Annapolis Gazette. Somebody was very concerned. They didn't report. It had tragic consequences. That person was well known, but nobody did anything about it to report that concerning behavior. When we have a concerning case, we're assessing and managing. We always look for a trusted source. And what I mean by that is whenever we get a concerning situation in the workplace and we're asked to manage it or at least assess it, we ask, is there anybody close with them? Is there anybody, a coworker of a soon to be terminated employee? Anybody in the workplace that has knowledge of them. It's just really better for that stronger business continuity. And by the way, business continuity, I just returned from Texas, where our team briefed the business continuity conference. Business continuity, nothing can disrupt your business continuity plans more than a workplace violence incident, as far as we're concerned. So how do these research reports help us understand this? They need permission and tools. We must understand it's their responsibility for bystanders to report their concerns to somebody in authority. You have to create that environment where they come forward without fear of retaliation with that psychological safety and not worry that, oh, that person's just, and dismiss that person as a complainer or trying to get somebody in trouble. We just really need to be confident that they'll take that. And it needs consistent training and awareness about how to speak up and what the process looks like. You'll have a more productive office. You may be aware of more problems in your company, but again, as Amy well says, it's counterintuitive, but it'll make a more productive office. So you need to turn bystanders into upstanders. Don't wait until the problem becomes serious. Seek assistance from employee relations. Give employees a fair chance to improve before terminating a performance improvement plan. The three keys to that are uniform, consistent, and fair. Treat everybody the same. Don't be biased just because the person's a friend of yours that we're concerned about. Be very fair, and those are the key elements: uniform, consistent, and fair.
Okay, we're wrapping up with our third and final poll question. This really is your opportunity. If you were able to join us for all 4 sessions or just today's sessions, and you heard something that you think, there was a way that we could support you or you'd like more information, this really is for us to kind of know what steps to take next. So make sure you still need to answer this question. It's kind of a softball. It's the easiest question you're going to get asked all day. But this will let us know how we can best support you after this webinar, which we would love to do. So there's a couple of seconds left here on this survey. Matt, I think one of the questions that we had come in is, if you're in an environment where maybe there has been retaliation historically, or people, there's kind of an element of fear based on previous incidents. How would you recommend that people help to kind of change that, or still encourage reporting where people might be a little bit more shy or a little bit more fearful to do so?
Well, like we said throughout, it's leadership buy-in. It has to be stressed to the managers to go back to their employees and really hit it home, set the example of not being biased, and encouraging that reporting, whether it be messaging, whether it be the promoting the anonymous hotline that you should be leveraging. All of those things come into play to create that, and you really set the example. Don't be a bureaucratic black hole and not getting back to the person. It's required by law in California to get back to the person. So it's really the credibility of the program is at stake for reporting.
Right. So not knowing about the problem doesn't mean there's any less of a problem, right? So
That's correct.
We might as well bring visibility and take the appropriate action, and not only mitigate some really serious threats, but also keep people feeling better about the environment that they're working in every day.
That's right.
All right.
Amy Edmondson couldn't have said it better, Lisa.
Exactly right. Any last thoughts before we wrap up our final housekeeping items here?
No, thank you for your time. It's really our workforce risk management team. We truly feel it's a public service. It's definitely something we get a great deal of satisfaction when we make a workplace safer and people safer. There's no more satisfying feeling.
Absolutely. I second your comments there, Matt. As Matt said, thank you so much for joining us. Just a reminder that there will be just a quick survey at the end of the session, so don't immediately click out. Make sure you do that survey so you can get the full credit for your time here today. You'll get your CEU credits or your HRCI credits in a week to 2 weeks. You'll see that documentation come through, assuming you answered all the poll questions and participate in the survey. As we mentioned, the session is recorded and it will be available on demand. You'll get communication with that following the survey. And really, whether you were only able to attend this session or you've been along with this team all the way through the 4 sessions as this workplace violence prevention series unfolded over the last couple of days, I just want to commend you for taking the time to be intentional about really securing the safety and the resiliency of your organization or agency. We have people on from companies of all different sizes and government agencies and across all geographies here. And there's a lot of other things you could be doing with your time. So I just want to commend you on behalf of our team for making this a priority, being intentional, and investing your time into these efforts. We are here to support you every step of the way as you thoughtfully consider what you've heard over these sessions and are thinking about next steps as far as implementing your plans and your programs. Please keep the Sikich Workforce Risk Management team at the top of your list of resources. We're happy to assist you however we can. I just want to take a quick moment to recognize our colleague, Vicki Froderman. She did an excellent job preparing all the materials for these sessions. Our partner Ashley Ben-Dixon for her session on domestic violence and its impact in the workplace. And of course, our amazing partners here in the Sikich marketing team, Stephanie, Bemi, and Megan, for making sure that we all have a seamless experience on performing these sessions. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. If you have any questions that didn't get answered, you can add those to your comment section in the post-session survey, and we'll make sure that we follow up and get those answered for you. So thank you so much for your time, and have a great rest of your week and into the holiday.